Welcome, everybody, to the Stress Test Podcast with Hammad and Rocky. Today, we'll be talking about Elon Musk's 10% purchase of Twitter, and of course, later his $43 billion offer to buy the whole enchilada, and of course, the turn down.
That's insane.
Yeah, that is insane. Well, if anyone has the money to buy it, it's Elon. So, but still insane. That's what, a quarter of his net worth. At 190 bill almost. So
I hadn't been following the richest folks list for a while. And I think you told me that he was the richest person in the world.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think you told me a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And because I hadn't been paying attention to that list whatsoever.
Well, most of that, too, is due to the skyrocketing valuation of Tesla. So it's more...
That's true.
It's more based on the value of Tesla and SpaceX as stocks versus like he has cash on hand.
Did SpaceX go public?
I think so.
Or just their valuation? Because what
I think it's primarily valuation. Yeah.
Okay, because what Forbes does is estimate your net worth. It doesn't actually know your net worth. It estimates it based on the holdings you have.
Yeah.
That includes assets, stocks, properties, companies, I guess, shares in companies. And so they guesstimate what your net worth is. So I think that's what they're basing it off of. And so I'm assuming even if I don't think SpaceX is public.
Yeah.
But I think they just use the value of
SpaceX. There's still a private valuation on it, right?
So they're probably just using that. Okay.
Yeah. So, and I mean, that could be up for interpretation, if you will.
Yeah.
Just considering, what we've seen with a lot of companies, i.e. Fast, and their $5 billion valuation, and of course folding within the past 2 weeks.
And they're actually a customer of the company I work for.
Oh, they are.
Yeah.
And they're actually heavily invested by the company I work for. So that is very interesting as a one-click checkout, right?
Yeah.
So
I think Bolt kicked their ass though.
Yeah, I think Bolt's still in the same boat, right? Like, I don't think they've proven their valuation quite yet.
But they've got more revenue.
Fair.
They've proven the revenue, right? They can sustain themselves longer.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, the topic.
We digress. Yeah, no. I mean, it's a very interesting story, especially because of the intent that Elon Musk purchased it for was. From his standpoint, he wants to open up free speech again on the internet. He believes censorship and free speech is being diluted and is being controlled by certain aggregates, if you will. So we're going to probably step through that. But first, we probably should start with the actual 10% purchase of Twitter. And then just what are your thoughts on that, Hammad? And maybe we can have a quick discussion on what that means.
So essentially what he did was, I think since January, or February, he's been slowly accumulating stocks.
Yeah.
It wasn't like all together. He didn't buy 10% of Twitter in one purchase. Mm-hmm. He's been buying it for a few months now. And then I think recently he just went over the 10% mark.
Yeah.
Right? So, and then I think that some folks were saying that there might be a legal issue with that. Yeah. Because he didn't disclose his purchases or something.
He disclosed it, I think, a month late. Shout out to Tom Nash, by the way. That's who I learned it from.
Gotcha.
But he
disclosed it late.
But they say he may have done that intentionally in order for him to position himself with the board on this poison pill that they've had to take.
Right. So it's because if he had disclosed it, If he had said, being an influential person, if he had said that he's buying stock in Twitter, that would have caused Twitter's stock prices to rise, which would have made it more expensive for him to keep buying because he bought it over a period of time. If he bought it all at once, it would just be a disclosure of like, okay, I bought the stock, right? But he bought it over time, and he got a lower price because Twitter's price didn't really fluctuate too much. It doesn't typically fluctuate that much. So I think they're saying that might be a problem. Might be. And if they decide to, take him to court for that or fine him or something, it might just be a fine.
I think the SEC fined him, but it was like $50,000, which For
relative.
Him, it's like change. Exactly. It's a drop in the bucket, right? And I think just one of the things that interests me was just Parag, the CEO of Twitter now, who replaced Jack Dorsey.
Right.
So this happened last weekend, right? Where Parag came out and said, "Hey, on Friday, I think Elon's going to join our team or the board of directors. Excited to have him on board with his innovative thoughts." And of course, Elon over that weekend, started providing tweets like, "Hey, since he put out a poll saying, should we turn Twitter HQ into a homeless shelter since no one comes into work anyways?"
And then I think he also had a tweet where he said, "Should we add an edit feature?"
Yeah. So that one. So I think the one I just mentioned, that one was a bit of a troll. But to your point, I actually really like that idea. I thought that was one of value that got the Twitterverse, if you will, all riled up and saying like, "Hey, Elon's the person, to really push Twitter as a product moving forward." I know a lot of investors or what's the term I want to use here for our retail investors, like folks like you and I who I can buy it off the street. We're really excited to see, like those type of innovative thoughts come from Elon, at least for Twitter, because I think there's been this stigma around Twitter that they haven't been able to like innovate quickly enough. And the product itself is fairly stagnant, and there's a lot of other competitors out there like, TikTok, Snapchat, even Facebook.
But not for the same discourse.
Yes, not for the same discourse.
Limited as it is, it's just the platform to go to when you want to broadcast your thoughts in 140 characters.
Yeah. I think they've even expanded.
Of course, everybody can explain their thoughts in 140 characters, right? Completely. So
I sense a lot of sarcasm there, but I digress.
I don't know. Like, it seems like anybody who has an opinion or wants to seem like to have an opinion can go and be the loudest person in the room.
Yeah.
With the 140 characters.
Oh yeah.
Right, and then
I would think it's even safe to say that's probably where the term cancel culture came from, or even started. As a platform, Twitter being, to your point, as I would say, not as deep because of the lack of characters that you can provide in a post. But to your point, it's very broad in its scale. I can reach thousands or even millions of people, with a very unnuanced, thought, and have people think that
spur of the moment, right? Isn't that what Trump did, right?
Yeah,
essentially spur of the moment tweets. That's what people do, right? They have an opinion, they form an opinion based on some maybe some bullshit or anything that they read or heard, and then or they're seeing like a sort of a bandwagon on top of something, and then they'll post their thoughts in 140 characters, like on their phone. Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
There's sometimes thought put into it. Sometimes there isn't. Sometimes it's just like...
I would say it's the distribution probably leans more to the latter.
Right, because of the majority of folks using it probably aren't thinking through everything that they're posting.
And just the urgency, right? Like they feel that they need to get this out to the world.
Yeah.
That was the intent of it, right?
Right, and it did really well for what it was intended to do, make Jack Dorsey and the founders a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it did provide some platform, but it is serving some purpose.
Yeah.
However, that purpose I feel has been twisted because, like you said, I feel like cancel culture really came from Twitter. It's like it's when I think of cancel culture, I equate it to Twitter. For some reason, that's what comes to my mind, just like subconsciously.
I do remember also seeing when Jack went on the Joe Rogan show with Tim Dillon. I think he brought one of the members of, I'm pretty sure it was the trust and safety team, to have a discussion on why they think, why they kind of ban certain people and why they don't. To your point, like, Donald Trump was able to make his stake his claims there, but he also got booted off the platform, which was a huge negative for him, especially leading up to the elections. I guess the question then is, Elon purchased that 10% in order to combat the lack of free speech, or combat more specifically censorship that he's seeing across the internet. He kind of wants to open it back up. So the original intent of that 10% was to grow it even further. And as you saw, he put in a $43 billion deal on, I think it was Monday or Tuesday, in order to just a complete takeover of Twitter as a whole, prior to the board turning it down, I think on Wednesday or Thursday. Do you think that Elon is the right person to give us free speech on the internet once again? And what does free speech mean here? I guess in terms of companies being able to own that as the gatekeeper, if you will.
I don't think there's any one person that is the right person to give us free speech, honestly. Because, yes, he's very eccentric. He goes against the grain in many ways, and he's been successful using that sort of mentality. And he's also very rich. So going against the grain is super easy for him. Yeah. He has almost no repercussions to worry about. He's got so much money that they can't touch him because it'll impact the economy of the country. Mm-hmm. So he has a lot of leeway. Yeah. And so he gets a lot of leeway with the government because of how influential he is.
Does he, though?
I think he does. I mean, there's a lot of flack. He gets a lot of flack from the government, but I feel like the shit that he says and does sometimes, like, he has the power to literally say, okay, we're moving the headquarters this company from this city to this city. He could shut down a city's economy entirely if he wanted to.
Yeah. I mean, you saw it with San Francisco, or the Bay Area, if you will, when they started transitioning a lot of their workforce from the Fremont plant to Austin, Texas now.
Yeah. So he's got a lot of influence. So I think anybody in a position of power, when you have money in this country, you are in a position of power. Yeah. And I think you do get certain privileges that normal people don't. Yeah. You have the resources, you have the money, and you just get privileges just because you are considered vital to the economy.
Agree.
Right? So I think he does have I think he gets a lot of flack, right? Because he just does get a lot of flack. Yeah. But at the same time, we haven't really seen much of that impact on him. Yeah. Over the years. He says some crazy stuff.
I don't know.
But he's stuff that seems crazy at initial glance. Yeah. And I feel like he hasn't really done that, which is fine. I mean, I'm not sort of hating on him or anything like that. But at the same time, I think going back to your question, you said, is he the right person?
Is he the right person?
And I said, like, I don't think anybody is.
Yeah. I think that's a good point, right? Because, like, it's kind of like in the land of the blind, if you will, the one-eyed man is king. That doesn't make it necessarily better, right? Right? Like, it doesn't get you the solution. It might be just an improvement over what we relatively have. Yeah. But I think, like, you see a lot of Elon fanboys, if you will, kind of jumping on the bandwagon of, like, hey, Elon's going to take this on and we're going to have free speech everywhere. And to your point, I actually agree. You can't have one person dictate, if you will, what free speech will look like, because then at the end of the day, it's a dictatorship, right? Only that one person has perspective. And I think you kind of need some kind of group to provide different perspectives to the blind spot that individual may have. But I do think you need someone to arbitrate on what that would look like.
So let me play devil's advocate. I think we're in agreement to some degree, right? Let me play devil's advocate. Yeah. If you look for the perfect solution to every problem, perfection becomes the enemy of good.
Understood.
So would it be viable to say, yes, no one person should determine what is free speech or be the gatekeeper for free speech, but is it safe to say that we should push for it? And if he's pushing for it, then he may not be the only person he may not be the person we need in the long term, but is he the right step forward?
Agree.
Right? And this is all a conjecture, right? We're not saying that he's going to become in charge of Twitter anytime soon, but it's really a hypothetical conversation. Like, is he the person?
We're stress testing here. Right?
We're stress testing it. Yeah. Is he the right person to push it forward? And for the current era, is he the first person right now that we will say, okay, you can take this on for now. Like, you're the one who can push it for now. Because everybody at some point, I feel like there's a danger of somebody becoming the ego getting in the way.
Agreed.
And then he's advocating for free speech today, but may not be advocating for free speech tomorrow because it might differ from his own perspectives. Yeah. And then again, that's not necessarily true. I'm not saying he would do that, but it's a danger that we face as humans to become biased towards our own opinions. So what do you think?
I actually think he would be... Let me take it a step further and explain my thoughts here. He would be a good gate to the next group, if you will, that can take it on.
Like a gateway drug.
Yeah.
we tasted free speech. Not anymore.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's the thing, right? You can't give people freedom of speech and then start to, like, limit it, right? Like, once you've opened Pandora's box to extent, you've got to be able to deal with the repercussions that come with that. And to your point, like, we had a great discussion on hate speech.
Right.
Right? And the legalities around it. I guess there is a difference here, right? Because you're not talking about rights versus like what the platform has to give you as part of user experience, right? Like they have other incentives besides giving you your constitutional rights. Right. But in this case, back to your original question, your question was, is Elon the right person for us to get where we want to go to? So, for example, we can iterate on whatever he would provide us with as a solution. I would say yes. And I would throw another question back at you as, okay, if it's not one person, who's in that group? So if we had a dream team, if you will, of people we can throw on a board or a group of like thought leaders, if you will. I hate using that term because that's such a buzzword now, but I think in this case it's apt. Thought leaders who would be able to provide us with a good, sense of like, okay, here's where we want to go with these discussions. Who would you throw in this group, if you will, of free speech avengers, if you will, to shape Twitter to be what it needs to be in order for us to have, I guess, discussions that enable free speech and lack censorship to some extent? I guess they would also be in charge of figuring out like what censorship is needed, because I wouldn't assume it's going to be like just pure. Like, are we saying that you don't want any censorship on this platform? Like zero. I guess we should start there. Like, what first? Like, if we're gonna build a platform with I just
think it's hilarious. Not hilarious. It's hilarious and troubling at the same time that we're talking about Twitter here, and then we're immediately talking about free speech.
Yeah,
because but it also says something about what we talked about Twitter's impact on the public, right? And the masses who may not be making rational decisions.
Yes,
are taking Twitter as their source of truth.
That's a better root cause attack. I actually like that approach better, right? Like, it has something to say about our society as a whole if we're using
correlating Twitter and free speech.
Yeah,
is just that platform is so powerful.
It is, right?
So, I guess like
I want to counter that though. I want to counter that though. I would say that means they built a damn good product. Right? Like, for example, we want to build products, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's what we want to go into. Like, for example, their goal, or Twitter's goal, is to get it to be sticky enough where you can't leave that app. And I think what Twitter has done, to the detriment of our society in some cases, and sometimes the benefit of our society, is they've done a damn good job of ensuring that we will not leave Twitter. Or to your point, which is the root cause here, is like, we take Twitter as kind of like, our source of truth for any matters, or it's a kind of our town square, right? Like,
I agree. It's like our town square, except the fact that people are basing decisions, their opinions, off of 140 characters.
Fair.
Without tonation.
Yeah.
Right? An important aspect.
Or research.
An important aspect of listening to somebody is the tonation of how they're saying something. You can get their intent. Right? And other information you can gather by listening to them in person or via like audio that you can't get with a character. You can't get their emotion, right? So some people may twist that emotion or interpret it completely differently than you would. You may interpret certain words differently from the way I would interpret certain words. For example, the word strange. We had the conversation the other day. The word strange itself is not a bad or derogatory word.
Yeah.
But we've associated with such negative connotations that if you read the word somebody was saying something was strange, most people would take that as if that person had a strong dislike towards that.
There's a negative connotation that comes with that word.
Right. Even though that may not have been their intent. But if you heard them speak in more than 140 characters, you will get more insight into what their actual opinion is. Fair. So I would say, yes, there's no doubt it's a great product, right?
Yeah.
It's done wonders for them, and it's done wonders for our society where we actually can have more of a public discourse. The negative is that it's limited to 140 characters, and then decisions and opinions are being formed off of those 140 characters, which I see as that's the negative, right? Not necessarily the platform itself.
But isn't that accountability of understanding the limitations of Twitter when it comes to Tenation on us as the readers or the
of course, no, 100%. It's not the company's objective or their responsibility, right? I think that goes into another question, right? Is we're talking about it as if like somebody like Twitter has some prerogative
or they're oppressing us
or they're oppressing us or something like that,
which I see quite a bit online as well.
It could be there's definitely agendas, right? Everybody's got an agenda. The left has an agenda, the right has an agenda. Twitter's controlled by individuals that are most likely, again, I'm hypothesizing here, that they are leaning left, right? So if the question is not about whether or not they have a right. It's more about, it's so critical to our society today that is it okay for them to suppress or hide things that are not aligned with their own beliefs?
And I think the correlating factors that you're bringing up or the hypothesis that you have of Twitter being more left-leaning, case in point, Hunter Biden's laptop issue that we saw last year, right before the elections, right? And this kind of feeds into censorship and free speech. I know we're kind of deviating from Elon Musk and his wanting to purchase that, but I think this was a factor for Elon to want to purchase it as well, right? When you're seeing certain news get tampered down, right? Like, for example, when the Hunter Biden news came out, with the laptop information, of course, him, trying to collaborate with Ukraine, and trying to, work some deals out
with energy companies in Ukraine,
colluding with those companies in order to get some benefits, leveraging his name or his father's name, if you will.
He's using his father's name to say that you should be giving me more. This is just a part of the stuff that was on his laptop, but it was him referencing his father in a code word.
Yeah. Wasn't it like the big guy or something like that?
I think that's what it was. I think so. And then he's saying you should pay me more for that. And then there's also pictures of him, I think,
doing drugs like that,
which he's known for being a drug addict. But I think the more important, the drug thing is a personal thing.
Yeah.
Drug thing is a personal thing, which I don't think really has an impact on Joe Biden's presidency, in my opinion. As long as it's not obviously negatively impacting his presidency. But I do feel like the energy stuff was sort of negative. And I don't want to drill the conversation here. Yeah. But yes, to your point, that is a perfect example of censorship.
Yeah. And I think if I'm not Elon, but if I were Elon and I were seeing things like that, I'm assuming or I'm correlating that he saw that episode or that instance and many other instances that we can probably flag here or discuss, and said, hey, you know what? I believe that we're in a space where certain topics aren't being mentioned or are being tampered down to some extent. Let's open it up. Which I thought they would actually take advantage of, especially when Elon produced the $43 million offer or $1 billion offer. if it was $43 million.
That's like a sort of like marketing for his bid.
Yeah. I mean, I think.
But would that really pressure Twitter board to sell? Like, I don't see like.
Well, I mean, so let's take a look at it. Let's take a retrospective on this. So when it was announced that Elon purchased 10%, right? The stock went up 20% or 30% on that day, and it stayed at that level for quite some time. Or it only needed an additional week until he produced the $43 billion offer after that at $54 a share, which would have been around 50 to 60% more than its price at that time. So if you really think about it, he's almost doubling the price since he started buying into the company, or news of him buying into the company became public. So I do think there were opportunities, and in considering the amount of growth that Twitter has had within the last year, I don't see. I guess maybe this is me lacking imagination on their part, or not knowing what other revenues or paths to revenue that they can have. But I just don't see Twitter being able to kind of like, really provide justification for the valuation that it previously had at $60 or $70 a share, considering that it's now at 30 to 35, I think, is where they're at now. But yeah, I just think, but it's hard for me to understand. And then once again, like, it's not as if Elon's just gonna buy it and then they're just gonna. I mean, they would go private, right? Was his point, or at least that's what a lot of people anticipate. But I just don't know how Twitter can surpass that effort at this point in time by turning them down. They took the poison pill, right?
Maybe. I don't know. I think what interests me more is their strong response to it.
Yeah.
they adjusted shareholder I think they redrafted a shareholder rights document or something. They passed that. The board passed that as after he sort of made that bid. It was just a bid. Yeah. Anybody can make a bid to buy any company. Anybody can file a bid to buy any company. That's public. Yeah. He went to the SEC and he filed an official bid to purchase it. They changed some rights and shareholder rights because they feel threatened. Yeah. Now, but the question is, why do they feel threatened? What is the threat? He's promising free speech, which the threat of one person being in control is, I think, a threat. Like the fact that one person being in control of Twitter, that is a threat to some degree. One person's opinion outweighing anybody else's. Yes. That is definitely a threat. Yeah. Right? If you talk about public discourse and communication and fairness. He's just the one person that's advocating for more free speech. But now that could still be a threat, because if he differs, like I said, if he differs in opinion with somebody else, would he suppress that opinion across the board or advocate for suppressing that? A perfect example of that would be, let me hypothetical situation, right? What if there was Tesla build quality, to my knowledge, is actually pretty poor.
Oh, I've heard of shit.
Yeah. So like you'll find screws loose. Yeah. If you pop the hood of a Tesla, you'll sometimes find screws that are not tightened all the way. So I've heard the quality's trash.
I've actually heard a lot of frustrations too around like since you have to take it to a Tesla dealer in order to get it maintained or to your point like fixed, like there's a lot of frustration around that because of the long queues or just the lack of resources that they have to be able to fix things for you. There was that one there's this one YouTuber, he took that opportunity and he kind of like started a channel around like Tesla failures and him fixing it and stuff like that. I'd have to look it up.
Interesting. But so yeah, let's use that as an example, right? What if there articles came out about Tesla's trash quality? A lot of them. What if like they started being shared on the platform?
Yeah.
That's a pretty light example, so I don't think he would do anything. But it's just an hypothetical, right?
Yeah.
Would he be somewhat motivated to do so?
Yeah.
And he would be within the power he has, he'd have the ability to do so.
I mean, he would definitely be motivated, right?
Yeah.
It's the question is whether
would he do it?
Yeah, would he act on that?
That's the question that we can't really answer. It's just a conjecture at this point, right?
And the problem is the perception, right? Will always be there with the public to say like,
not that I always agree with like perception, like controlling how we act and move, but it's still there. Like, you can't get rid of it.
Agree. But I do want to go back to your point about, I don't know if I want to call it insecurity here, but there had to have been a reason that the board turned it down, right? What do you have a hypothesis there that we can kind of stress test here of why the board would want to turn it down? I mean, I know Jack doesn't have enough shares. I think he might have even sold all of it off, if I'm correct. But I know his leverage there isn't what it once was.
So before we get into that, just the relationship between Jack Dorsey and Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Are they the ones who disagree on? I know Jack Dorsey is a huge advocate for crypto, Web3, etc. And then Elon Musk says it's stupid. Is it he's the one or somebody else?
No, I think Elon Musk is a big proponent of crypto. I just don't think
crypto, yes, but is he about Web3? Is he the one who was talking badly about Web3, and then him and Jack Dorsey have like
trolls it sometimes. You know how Elon is. You can't really tell where he stands with certain topics.
He makes it.
Yeah, I mean, because there was that. I mean, he was the reason behind the huge inflation, if you will, behind Dogecoin, right? He kept pushing Doge, and of course, even with Bitcoin, he provided an avenue for people who purchase Teslas to leverage Bitcoin in order to procure a car. And of course, I think I saw him last week on a panel with Jack discussing Bitcoin.
Oh, okay.
That was hosted by ARK Invest with Kathy Wood and group. So I don't, but to your point, to answer your original question, I don't know where he technically stands on Bitcoin, whether he's like Michael Saylor, a huge advocate of it, or even Jack, a huge advocate of it. Jack Dorsey, by the way, former CEO of Twitter, or if he's just kind of like, I would say like he's either in the middle or that's trending more towards the adoption of crypto and Web3 overall. He's definitely not with Warren Buffett and group where they think it's just trash. And even Bill Gates to some extent, right? Like they think it's useless.
Okay, so what was the question again?
Yeah, the question here is the board turned it down.
Why do I think?
Yeah. What do you have any hypothesis or hypotheses around why the board wouldn't want to allow Elon to, and I'll even abstract it even further, Elon to have a say. Because like you can tell like with the moves that they're providing, even when he procured the 10%, gave him the board offer, that was contingent on him capping himself at 14%, and not procuring any more than that, which would have limited him severely as a shareholder and as a board member. So I think every move that they've taken up to this point, since Elon's made it public that he owns 10% of Twitter, and of course, since he's been lambasting Twitter and their lack of lack of free speech and their utmost censorship, there's a lot of correlation that showcases that Twitter or the board of directors at Twitter are, I don't want to say insecure, maybe I'll use insecure. There's a lot of fear, I'll say, around Elon being more of an active member within that community, if you will.
Didn't you have a follow-up question after that?
Yeah, I do. But I want to answer this one first.
So my answer to that was, the first answer was there's a fear. Yeah. They don't want one person in control of something so critical.
Got it.
Right? And if I put my conspiracy hat on for a bit, it just seems like I've said before, there's an agenda in almost everything that goes on in society. Like anything big like this level, there's always an agenda behind it. Whether it's left-leaning or right-leaning, there's some sort of agenda. And Twitter being the platform it is free speech something that would be supportive of these agendas in long term?
Like, what do we mean by free speech, though?
Like
I guess, because I see free speech, but it does bias one way versus another.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
That bias is not... When you're biasing towards a certain
group
or
I mean, be
ideology,
transparent. Like, what do we mean by that?
Well, let's talk about the liberals.
Yeah.
Right?
I do think
Twitter is very liberal.
Yeah.
Right? And I think there's a bias towards liberals on Twitter and a lot of the big social media platforms today. Right?
So is that something that Fox News has just put in our head, or is that something that we can, like, at least have a high correlative data that signals that, like, yes, this is true? Because I do remember seeing an article, and of course I say that without any data to back it up right now or references to point out, that there was actually more traffic produced by these social media sites for right-leaning influencers, if you will, than there were left-leaning influencers.
But what time period?
This was during probably the Trump era. I wouldn't say... I'm not sure if that... I'm pretty sure that data's stale now. And once again, this was... I was probably third, fourth order derivative that I was getting this, right? This was just me reading an article to kind of like figure this out. But I do remember seeing that.
Well, so I don't know the numbers.
Yeah.
This is all conjecture, right? But we have examples of censorship.
Yeah, like
you
the
mentioned
Hunter
Biden. I would say
situation.
even Trump being banned from Twitter is a form of censorship.
But was that because of free speech, or was that due to him inciting people? Because that's where the gray line is, and we've had that discussion of like hate speech.
What falls under inciting? I think we had the conversation too.
Yeah, and I think that's where it's difficult, right? I mean, you can argue, or a lot of people are trying to argue, that January 6th was part of him, or the efforts that or the tweets he provided led up to that mass or critical mass being grouped in the Capitol at that time, and of course them being able to kind of like do this uproar, if you will. But then of course there's also discussions of like, was that intentional by the left, which we can go into like these long, deep rabbit holes with conspiracy theories.
Exactly.
Which I don't know if I'm prepared to go into at this point in time.
My point is, somebody decided he was inciting.
Yeah.
Who was that somebody?
Oh, yeah. I mean, and that's probably where I agree with you, right? Like, according to Facebook, they have a independent panel that who's actually paid by
who's
Facebook.
On that panel.
Yeah, exactly. To evaluate whether Trump has violated any of the policy rules.
And again,
I will also argue too, like, these companies don't owe it to.
They don't.
Right? They're literally companies.
They don't.
With incentives outside of our constitutional rights, right?
Outside of, but under.
Yeah, outside. Well, can you elaborate?
Meaning, like, they have their own rules and regulations.
Yeah.
But they're still, like, they can't do things that are against the law.
Oh, fair.
As organizations, right?
Agree.
So
well, what does that mean, though? Like, so for example, if I deem your speech, like, you're more than welcome to have any free speech you want, but like, if I have policies, if on my platform I have policies that state like, hey, we won't allow any like.
Right, and the question isn't whether they did anything illegal.
Fair.
Right. The question is whether it's
fair and unbiased, like Fox.
I don't even want to use the word fair because it's so broad. It is very. But at the same time, I think the point isn't that. The point is, yes, you can do whatever you want. Nobody's like, I can criticize you for suppressing somebody else's opinion, right?
Yeah.
And lifting others' opinion. I can criticize that. That's my right to do so. Your right to do whatever you want with your platform. My right to do whatever I wish as far as criticizing you. It's also Elon Musk's right to say, you know what, I don't like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to buy you out and try to implement a more fair, in his perspective, platform. Mm-hmm. That's where the conversation is. It's not about whether they did anything wrong. It's just that, why is he doing what he's doing? And then why are they so far against it that they took so many measures to combat him, right? Like the limit on how much he can own.
Sequential measures as well.
Sequential measures, like limiting what he could buy, and then I mean, they're within their right to reject it, reject the offer. I didn't even expect them to buy it. I thought he was trolling, but then I saw the SEC link. Yeah. So it's probably a partial troll on his part because he knows they weren't going to affect it.
Yeah, I think it was in my opinion, a great chess move as well. I mean, like he already has a brand of who he is. Not to necessarily say he would have provided free speech or limited censorship. To your point, right? But I do think he would have been a gateway to a group that could have helped us.
That was your question.
Yes.
Yeah, that was your question.
That's why I'm trying to segue there. Who is in that group then? Yes. We believe. And this is personally, right? Not to say like, this is based in our opinion. Yeah. Who would give us the? Let me try to think of a term here. The right amount of distribution across our society to enable free speech and limit censorship to the point where we can have actual valuable dialogue and constructive discourse, if you will.
I'll have to think about who I would put on that list because I feel like that would be a huge investment of trust, right, on my part on naming somebody that I think could fit that bill.
I mean, Facebook did it when they... I'm being sarcastic. Facebook did it when they built that independent board, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So, which I always laugh at. I love Facebook, by the way.
I will say... no American politician can be on that list.
Oh, I agree with that.
I don't care what year they're from or whatnot. No American politician should be on that. I don't trust the politicians. They all have agendas, right? And we can have another conversation on what I think about U.S. politicians in general. Politics everywhere is kind of crappy, but U.S. politicians specifically, I don't think I have someone I trust.
I mean, another problem too is they're very stuck with ideologues, right? Yeah. So I don't think they'd be able to provide critical thought based on the nuances that are there. They'll just toe the party line, if you will, even if they disagreed with it, right? Yeah. That would be the frustrating part. So to your point, no politicians. I would probably throw a name out there. I want to get your thoughts on it. Jordan Peterson. I think I'd throw him in that board. I've liked anecdotally what I've seen. And anecdotally, I have no data, right? Showcasing like all of the discussions he's provided. But one thing I can abstract out of the discussions that I've seen him provide is he's a critical thinker. He's willing to challenge himself and provide contradictive thoughts on why certain things should or should not be. And he logically provides a progression on steps of why he believes certain things should occur or not occur. So I do like how he thinks there. He'd be one person that I'd say would be a candidate to be on this imaginary board.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. I don't think I would be against that. Yeah. I think that you're right. I think someone who can listen as well as argue their point in an effective manner.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Jordan Peterson is definitely someone who's really good at that. He's also very well studied and versed in as far as like rights, historical violations of human rights such as free speech, etc. So I think he'd be a good person on that. I'd have to think about who else. Honestly, I don't think I can think of somebody right now.
I'm trying to think of one. I know someone else, but I feel like if I were to name that person, individuals on this podcast would be like, dude, you just pointed at two more conservative or right-leaning individuals. But I'll say his name, Coleman Hughes.
I don't.
He's a young dude out of, I don't know where he's out of. I don't know if it's New York or DC, but he actually has a lot of great discussions on just race in general, and of course, like the restrictions that we put on ourselves based on one dimension, right? So he's not a big fan of treating people like a monolith or generalizing people, which we say we don't. Why are we generalizing people? But then you see it happen all the time.
You bucket people.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cancel culture.
So I'm a huge fan of the nuances that he dives into in order to discuss certain topics. I think he would be a good individual.
I'll have to check him out.
I'm also trying to think of someone else. I actually like. I don't know how apt she would be here from a free speech censorship standpoint, but I like Donella Meadows. She wrote the book called Thinking in Systems. Like, I think she's just a very logical thinker. Like, just the way she approaches problems. So she's an engineer, right? She wrote this book called Thinking in Systems. Essentially what she's trying to do in that book, or the intent of that book, is for her to kind of distill to us as readers, like how you should think when you're building a system, whether it be a social system, right? Or whether it be like a mechanical system or software system. It doesn't matter, right? She says there's characteristics across all of those elements that you can use, or principles, if you will, that you can use in order to kind of like build a good system. So I think she would be another good individual, at least from an architecture standpoint, on what we see. Because she could call out, like, for example, you remember going through digital logic, right? And then you'd have like contradicting things, and then like, or you'd have like these like huge like logic boards, and everyone, like, the main thing, what was the main thing we wanted to do? Like, put it through a cardinal map, right? So we go through this whole reduction to have like the simplest circuit available to us. Like, I think that's the type of thing she would want to do as we're coming up with our constraints or boundaries for what we want out of a system that is supposed to produce free speech or limit censorship. And this is very abstract thinking. So
gotcha. Yeah, I don't know those people, so I'm no reserve judgment on that. But Jordan Peterson, I definitely heard a lot of. So definitely agree with that one. I don't, like I said, I have to think about, like I said, it's a huge investment of trust, and I feel like, I would need to do a lot more research on that. And I don't know. I feel like it's a hard discussion to have. But point being, I think Elon Musk, I say why not? Yeah. I'm not on Twitter. Maybe I should be. Maybe we should be, both of us, a little bit to some degree. Yeah. But I actually don't. I want to see what happens. Yeah. I say yes. Let's do it. Let's give him Twitter. If it was within my control, I would probably say give him Twitter.
So if you were a board member and you had some controlling stake, or you had a vote.
Well, no, I don't know about that. I'm saying as a member of society.
Fair.
As a member of society that sees the problems that we face today as far as cancel culture, censorship, I would say, and I think I'm tired of the constant barrage of left-leaning agenda. I'm not right-leaning. But I'm also not completely left-leaning. So, I'm a moderate. I consider myself moderate, just for.
I would agree with that too.
Right,
but I don't know. I always get fearful of the discussions of like, hey, there's a lot of left-leaning or right-leaning, like propaganda, if you will, right? Because that's what we're starting to see out of like a lot of these social media websites. But I don't know if that's actually true that a majority of it's left-leaning. And then B, are we true that it's even coming from the sources themselves? Because there has been a lot of...
What are the sources?
What I mean by that is like there has been a lot of... And I'm putting my conspiracy hat on, but I think this is actually based in fact more than it is conspiracy. Like there are like nation states who are, you know, like the whole bot issue, right? Like because of anonymity, which the internet provides you and these social media sites provide you with, it's hard for you to understand where the source is coming from. So there's a lot of people who think like, hey, this might not even be emanating from like U.S. individuals who are either left or right leaning. This is emanating from like China or Russia.
Well, right? Let's leave Twitter alone for a second. Yeah. The most prominent news sources, majority of them are left leaning. Would you agree with that?
I don't know about that. Fox News is still the most watched news channel.
But I'm not talking about the most watched. The liberal ones, MSNBC, CNN,
yep,
the ABC, whatever the big ones are, they would add up to more than Fox News.
So you're saying if I were to take an aggregate of those viewers,
my point is that's not important as far as I'm concerned. I'm saying is there are X number of predominant news sources.
Fair.
Right, that are watched, that are, forget their actual numbers or ratios, and most of them are left leaning.
Agree.
Right, just based on I would say they're left leaning. It's all, again, it's my analysis of what I've seen from them.
Yeah.
That decides that helps me decide whether or not I think they're left leaning or right leaning.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not judging them on it. It's just more like, okay, this is where their views align typically.
Agree.
So given that, and then the topics that have come up that we're probably going to in a future video, certain topics that come up, certain cancel culture related, and the way the articles are phrased, the way headlines are phrased, I can assume there's a lot from that perspective. I see a lot of left leaning.
Yeah.
And a lot of liberal like barrage, like that I see, which is fine. It's just that some of the topics just really, the way it's gone about and ignoring the sort of the fairness aspect and ignoring the like, let's listen to both sides concept. Again, this is true for Fox News too.
Oh yeah, I was about to say.
Fox News is completely right, and they don't listen. They're just completely out there as well. But I think from what I see on a day to day, is for me, it's the left leaning, and I feel like in our social media as well, because that tends to be more left leaning as well. Okay, and so in society, I'm seeing a lot of left leaning things in today's, like in the past 4 or 5 years, especially.
Yep.
Right. And so honestly, my opinion is, you know what? I just want to see a difference. Let's see what happens, right? Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Let's give it to Twitter. Let's give it to Elon Musk. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens. And I expect that we'll see something, whether it's positive or negative. I don't know. I kind of just want to see what happens because I want to see something different. When something's not working, if I observe something is not working, which I think Twitter is not working in a lot of cases, I want to see something different. I want to see another different course of action that results in something different, hopefully.
Yeah.
And so that's my philosophy on it. It's not whether or not he would be the right choice or whether it would be good or not. I just think it would be different, and I would love to see that.
I mean, at least from my perspective, what I want to see moving forward, especially when it comes to like free speech and like censorship or limiting censorship, is more of the opportunity for us to become more anti-fragile. Right? Like,
yes,
I do believe like we are in a state where we are very fragile because we're not allowing ourselves. So, for example, when you're becoming anti-fragile, what you're doing within any system, whether it be social, mechanical, or digital, if you will, you're trying to stress test that system to make it more robust against future attacks. Right? We are operating in the opposite direction, or we're digressing as a society because now we're becoming more and more sensitive to certain topics where we can't even, like you brought up the previous nomenclature of strange. We can't even say that without people getting offended to the extent where you can potentially get canceled for calling someone strange, right? Even though the word is apt in the context of that conversation, right? Like, for example, we had this discussion about bias, right? Like bias having a negative connotation, even though bias is a truly technical word, especially when you're looking at a spectrum of things. You have to bias towards a very narrow view, or I won't even say view,
or you risk not making decisions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You'll be very
everything indecisive. Is a bias. Me choosing to get up right now is a bias. Me choosing to go out the door, go to the bathroom is a bias because I don't want to hold it in. Yeah. I'm biasing towards.
I mean, right? Like in machine learning, or even I'll even abstract it to signal processing. Like there's always going to be that balance. And shout out to Jacob for like pointing me in this direction. Like variance versus bias. You can have a ton of like perspectives, but you'll get stuck in analysis paralysis if you don't bias towards one thing. So, like, I think whenever you mention the word bias, people start, whoa. Are you a bigot? And it's like, no. Like, I do agree you need to be able to manage your bias in certain situations, especially when we're talking about social aspects. However, the term bias should not be, I guess, ostracized whenever we're discussing certain things, because you have to bias at some point in time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, I would have to say you have to bias literally more times than not.
Yeah, you're always biasing.
Literally, that is the evolutional process.
You're always biasing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I would agree.
Biases will always exist. Discrimination is a choice.
Oh, yeah.
Let me put it that way.
Oh, that's a good one.
Biases always exist. They're not negatives. Discrimination is bad. Yeah. That's where if your biases cause you to discriminate, then I believe that's a negative. I don't want to say totally that's bad as if like it's a general thing. It's like I believe it's bad.
Yeah.
Right?
I totally agree with that one. Because, I mean, at that point in time, you should leverage critical thought in order to challenge whatever bias is enabling you to discriminate against a certain group or person, more specifically. Right?
Going back to the question about, like, whether or not it's a lot of left liberal barrage, I think let me sort of also add another note to what I observe on a day-to-day, right? We live on the East Coast, right? Yep. In a major metropolitan area.
Good old DC, right?
Right? Yeah. In the area we live in, this is what I observe. This is the people, forget the online presence, right? Yeah. In society around me, in a direct vicinity, right? And the loudest people that could cause the whole cancel culture storm. That's fundamentally where it's derived from.
Oh, let's go into that one, because and this is where you and I probably vehemently agree on this. Like the amount of virtue signaling that goes on in some of these areas, specifically in our area, can be very frustrating. I mean, I've seen issues where people will just say like, "Hey, I don't like person A or person B." And you're like, okay, let's have a discussion on why you believe that person A or person B is not a good person, right? And it's like, oh yeah, because he or she just aligns with this certain ideology. And it's like, well, technically you're aligning with the counter ideology. And it's like, no, that's why not. And then they'll go into the actual topics of like, hey, like this is what this person has done. And it's like, well, do you disagree with that?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, not really. But I disagree with other factors. And then when you actually examine those factors aren't actual.
It goes back to the bucketing, right?
Yeah.
The same bucketing concept that you mentioned earlier, where we're trying to generalize and you're categorizing people rather than looking at them individually and based on their individual opinions.
And that's why I asked you, who needs to be accountable on gathering the information in order to make these decisions?
The individual.
Yes, sure. Exactly.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is a lot of individuals don't do that. They take the first clickbait item they see and take that as their source of truth versus actually reading the article, digesting that information, looking for correlating signals that make that information
That's if you see the
better,
article.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
And that's the whole point of this conversation about why
what
Elon wants to buy, right?
Fair.
Yes, it's not their objective to be fair or whatever. It's not they don't have that responsibility. Some people may think differently, but as a business, they don't have that responsibility.
Yeah.
That's just some social moral responsibility. Again, that could be viewed as from two different sides. Maybe it is a social moral responsibility. Maybe it's not. That's, again, two different perspectives, but I'm not here to argue that. the point is that if you can't, if you want to give the responsibility to individuals, you have to let them find information.
Fair.
Right. This week, yeah. If you can't let them find that information, then that's a problem.
Touché.
Right. Whether or not it's a right or like wrong or illegal or not illegal, that's not the issue here. It's like whether is it right or not. You know.
Well, I mean, that does get into.
But before we go into, I feel like we switch topics a little bit. Before we go into that one, so let me just close out my other thought that I had. So just living around in society, like where I'm living, right, and the viewpoints that I see and the loud voices that are around me, right. I think the cancel culture thing. That's what to me I observe as okay. This is the liberal barrage.
Oh, fair.
In my mind, because that's what's around me, and in most major cities, this is the case.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying everybody in those cities believes this way. It's the loudest voices, and the cancel culture or like origins are typically in these major cities. If you were to go out and say something in person, you're more likely to get canceled if based on some topics in major cities rather than like in suburbs or the more rural areas.
That's fair,
right? And
I think that's an apt hypothesis. I think we should probably challenge that at some point in time. Right, like at least in DC, I don't think I've seen that as much, like relative to you, maybe. Like, because I'm
just saying in the general sense. I'm not saying I've seen it. I'm seeing like there's just there are demonstrations and protests and all whatever that goes on in more major cities, and that's just because most of the liberals reside in major cities.
That's fair.
That's not a hypothesis. That's a given, right? Therefore, these views,
the data points correlate.
These views and the loudest voices typically aggregate to these centers, right? And that's just a correlation there, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm living in those areas, so I see it, and it's concerning to me that centers of economic growth, government leadership, etc., are all overpowered by one side so much.
Fair.
And that's why it's like for me, it's like I just want to see a difference. I want to see something different on these social media platforms because it's sort of like it's just that not just the online presence, as well as the real life presence of this sort of mentality and this sort of like overwhelmingly liberal like area.
Yeah,
I think that that combination is what makes me think we just need a difference. Like we just need some place where folks can at least go and get some like say something fairly and not have to worry about like not getting their information out or not being shown or not being shared with people.
Yeah.
So again, this is not. I'm not a red. I'm not. This is just like okay. This is my perception of what society is today.
Yeah.
Around me, and I just think it would be better off to, or at least I would see something different.
A different approach,
which would be nice to see. Whether it's not good or bad, we'll have to see. But
I would agree with that. So. I mean, that's why I'm interested. To your point, right? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And to your point, we've kind of just taken that stance of like, hey, we're going to do the same thing over again, and why isn't anything changing? You know what I'm saying? Like, if we're not changing the inputs or the system itself, and in this case, I think we're talking about the system itself, we're always going to have the same outcome.
Yeah, and honestly, it's not even the opinions a lot of times. I mean, there's some crazy opinions out there, both on the right and the left.
Yeah.
There's crazy opinions out there on both sides, right? And I disagree with a lot of those crazy opinions.
Yeah.
Again, I'm saying
would you say it's a normal distribution? What we're saying now is like, for example, like the tail ends, if you will, of this normal distribution are the loudest ones, whether it be right or left.
I feel like a lot of opinions these days are formed as counters rather than true opinions.
Elaborate on that.
Well, it's okay, you've got like...
I think I got it at the tail end, but
elaborate
for
the... dinner?
No.
It's okay.
Close the door, buddy. Sorry about that. This is real time, raw information.
So just to clarify, I think a lot of people in society today don't like something they hear or see, and then they form, rather than forming an opinion based on their own research and facts, like you said, right? They form a strong opinion against because they feel like their opinion is not being heard or valued in society. So therefore, they're so vehemently against that other person's opinion, whether or not everything about what that person stands for, rather than specifically an idea or a topic that they're sort of against. Make sense? So like,
no, that makes
if you
sense.
said you hate,
I mean, it's
ice
tribalism.
cream. If you said you hate ice cream, and I took offense, like that was, and then you didn't hear like what I had to say about ice cream, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. I got pissed off, and I said, you know, I don't like this person in entirety.
Entirely, yeah.
You know, because that person doesn't let me
Like
talk. That's I think the root cause. Like, there's no discourse.
Yeah.
Right, in society. There's no, because some sides in some are not given the opportunity in certain areas. Like I said, the major cities are very blue or liberal, and so I feel like a lot of people that are more conservative don't feel like they get enough. And a lot of these platforms online are, we agreed in the beginning, a lot of these platforms online are typically run by left-leaning folks, and so I feel like a lot of these conservatives don't feel like they don't have the opinion, or they don't have a voice. And so a lot of them just like immediately transition to like the extreme, just to counter the extreme of the left.
Oh, fair.
Because they don't feel like they have an opinion. Not necessarily they might agree or not. You know, it's just more like, well, fuck that. I'm going to fight.
Yeah.
That's sort of the mentality. And so I think just having a more fair place where people are getting heard, okay, right, regardless of what side they're on, right, I think would make actually people more moderate, more closer, more agreeable, more compromising, rather than the extremes we have.
Yeah.
And then another topic for later is, you know, these extremes are only beneficial to our government.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I know exactly where you went with that one, but we will save that one for another episode. But no, specifically speaking on censorship and free speech, I think, ultimately, I do believe that we need to have a different approach, to your point, on like how do we provide a more open and transparent opportunity for all individuals to speak, whether right or wrong, right? And then we can figure out what the repercussions look like after outcomes there. Because to your point, we've had the same outcomes with the same processes and approach for the past 10 years. And I mean, as you can see, it's not really helping us right now.
And I think some people might argue, okay, why don't you just get, for the Twitter case at least, why not just make another one if you don't like it so much?
Oh, you mean like the truth or the truth
make another one. Well, it's like, and my argument to that would be, well, yeah, we could. There are, right? But it holds such an important place in society that's not equivalent.
Yeah.
Right. This is a platform that's impacting society as a new one would not, because it doesn't have that influence.
Yeah.
Right. And so I would say it's not the same.
And why would you want to do that? Hear me out real quick. Like, wouldn't you want everyone to speak openly in the same space?
Yes.
Versus everyone having their own app, or every group or community having their own app.
Yeah.
Having, confirmation bias in there to some extent, right? Like, exactly. I understand, like, you want to look for like-minded individuals to have discussions with, but I think when you bias only towards that, you fall into this trap of just being stuck with confirmation bias.
Well, I think the argument would
limits your perspectives there.
I think the argument would be not just make a platform for one opinion, but make a platform that's more fair.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. No, so what I was saying was,
I see what your point is.
Yeah, I was trying to elaborate. Like, why would we? Like, wouldn't it be beneficial for us as a society?
Of course, I agree with that.
We have one platform that's open for everyone. Right, like that's why I like Reddit, right?
As long as it's open.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
like you can have your own communities where you have specific topics in, but like you should still have some general page where you can go to, or some general forum more specifically speaking, where you can go to and, have voice certain discourse or certain opinions that, to your point, should be available to all. The problem is too, that I can see from that standpoint is information overload as well, right?
Yeah.
Everyone has a perspective, even us on this podcast, right? How many podcasts are out there? Millions now, right? We all have perspectives. At some point in time, who's going to arbitrate this? And I think this is the discussion. Right now, we believe that the arbitrators of the primary platform for our society, for tweets at least, or things that are analogous to tweets, is Twitter, and that's just a lot of power to hold, man.
I think, this is probably another topic we can dive into a little bit later, but I think the real problem here is the real problem that Twitter sort of fed on, right, is that people have short attention spans these days.
Oh, yeah.
And so the short attention spans causes them to read a headline or a tweet, and boom, they're triggered. Or whatever. They don't do any more research. They don't do anything because they don't want to spend more time. Yeah. That's the society we live in today. If people had better or longer attention spans, they could go and do research and actually do due diligence into the topic that they were going to comment on or form an opinion on before they actually made a comment or opinion on it, right?
I totally agree with that. And that's why I asked, I want to trace this back to my original question, sorry about that, about accountability, right? I think we need to retrain ourselves in this society to be able to do that. Yeah. Understanding that informational overload and the is a thing. We have to be able to kind of have latency in us communicating our thoughts, and that latency should give us enough time to actually validate is this something that I should tweet about immediately, or is this something that I probably should wait on, do some due diligence, have a discussion with someone or a domain expert in this field before I start going off. I mean, you saw it a lot during COVID, where on both sides, a lot of people were just out of pure emotions, just tweeting anecdotal thoughts, or in a lot of cases, misinformation on both sides, right? I don't want to, there's clear cases where both sides did that.
Do you think short attention spans and instant gratification go hand in hand?
Oh, yes,
another topic for another
video. No, man, instant gratification. Oh, that is, our society has a huge issue with instant gratification right now. I mean, I'm trying to decouple what I want.
Well, let me pause
because that really feeds into Twitter and free speech and censorship.
Yeah. But let me pause you there.
Yeah, please.
Should we wrap up this one?
I did want to go back to just how the accountability, because let me gather my thoughts here real quick. So we discussed Elon Musk owning 10% of it, what his intent was behind owning Twitter, of course, enabling free speech, limiting censorship to some extent. We're not sure where that line is. We probably think that Elon would be a good bridge to a group of folks who can improve our stance on free speech. I agree with you on just the biases that are there within the social media space. I also wanted to cover just the accountability that we have as a society, as individuals within the society, of being able to kind of filter out certain things. Because you got to remember too, we didn't grow up with Twitter.
Right.
So there's an assumption that I have, it's a hypothesis, I'll say, that as generations come after us, they'll have the tools to be able to manage their work-life balance or their social media life balance better than our generations can. I don't know if that's true. I think to some extent too that there's a possibility that it might just fuck them over because we just landed this bomb that is social media in their lap, and we're hoping they can deal with it. But I'm hopeful and optimistic here that they'll be able to build the anti-fragility that you'll need to be able to live with social media.
So
and
next
hopefully
time,
improve it.
I don't remember this off the top of my head. But next time, in the next one, when we discuss these topics, we should talk about the demographics of the Twitter usage.
The demographics of Twitter
like
usage.
the ages of folks using Twitter to see what that like how that differs. I know there's definitely a variance over the different.
We need to get a Jamie. That's what we need to do.
Yeah.
Like Jamie from Joe Rogan, to pull up these charts so we can.
No, but next time we can have that discussion. We can talk about that because that I feel like is very important. Like goes along with your point. Is like maybe we'll see the exact opposite. Maybe it's younger folks that are using it more. But my suspicion, my hypothesis right now, I've seen this before, so maybe I'm just basing it off of something I've seen before, is that it's actually folks our age and older
using
that are
Twitter,
using Twitter,
Facebook, Instagram.
More, right.
Yeah.
And then...
So wait, are you? Let me abstract that to social media in general. Are you saying... and of course, please feel free to say you don't know. Are you saying that social media usage in younger age groups is diminishing?
No, I think the platforms they're using are changing.
Fair. Okay.
Yeah, but I may be wrong. I may be wrong.
I don't think you're wrong on that.
I think TikTok is, Instagrams, the Snapchats are more that space. But I also don't think those are competitors to Twitter.
Yeah.
Because they just don't offer the same platform.
Yeah.
Like TikTok is TikTok. It's you use it for a long period of time, but it's not like there's no chains of conversations going on.
Yeah, I would agree.
It's not the focus. Let me put it that way.
Fair.
Where Twitter is the focus.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So I feel like it's just not the equivalent.
It's a town square, right?
There's no equivalent to Twitter.
I'm trying to think. I'm even trying to think of like an international, like even copycat or comparative.
I'm sure that East Asia has a bunch.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, I think that's about it on my side. I mean,
we can continue this conversation definitely. We brought up a lot of topics I think that we can talk about.
Yeah.
But we should probably wrap this one up.
Yeah. I think, okay, so that's episode 4, if you will. Just Elon Musk.
Or whenever we decide to post this.
Yeah, exactly. Well, sorry about that. Shouldn't have brought that up. But Elon Musk procures 10% of Twitter. And I mean, it's to be said whether he sells it off or not now, considering that the board turned down his full buy offer. But right now he has 10% or is the largest shareholder of Twitter, and he wants to enable free speech and censorship. So
I find it hilarious. He can just it's a whim. I mean, he's got what? He's like 50. He's got 50, at least 50 billion on the next richest person, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah,
I think he's got like 270 billion net worth, and then the other one's like 210, 215, 220 or something.
And I think that's Jeff, right? Bezos.
Is it? Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Bezos, and then it's probably Warren Buffett or Bill Gates, 3rd or 4th.
That's probably right. I think Bill Gates was on top of Warren Buffett last time I checked.
Yeah. So good old Satya, bringing the cloud to Microsoft, helping them out.
Yeah.
But that was our discussion today. Just wanted to say thanks again for if you've stayed long enough with us during this chat. If you have any thoughts on this specific topic, please leave it in the comments below. We do our best to answer it immediately. So,
and anything specific about this topic that we didn't go into or you want us to go into, please point it out and let us know, and we'll cover it in the next video or something.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, until then, have a great day, great weekend, whatever. Right?
Like and subscribe.
Oh yeah, too. I always forget to say that.
That's all right. Cool. Well, peace.
Peace.